The Warsaw Uprising began on the 1st of August, 1944. 0 hour, or W hour as they called it, was supposed to be at 5 o'clock. But the first outbreak of shooting began earlier in the day at Joliborz, the northern suburb of Warsaw. That encounter, which began at 1:30 p.m., was the first skirmish of the Warsaw Uprising. As the saying goes, much has been written. Was it a good idea? Was it launched at the right time? Were there other opportunities? You may well ask. The fact remains that it did take place, and the people who took part in it were brave and beautiful. In the annals of uprisings against tyrannical rule, the Warsaw Uprising is unsurpassed. For 63 days, the Poles waited for the Russians to come across the river from the east and aid them in their rebellion against the Nazis. This did not happen. History has told us why. The Russians were quite happy to watch the Poles be destroyed by the Germans, rather than for the Poles to be free after World War II. There is no doubt about this. This was Stalin's plan. The Warsaw Uprising is indelible on the memory of the 20th century. At the Warsaw Uprising Museum, this history is set in stark terms. You're able to take a close look at those 63 days of fighting for freedom. This is an experience that will not leave you untouched. It will change the way you think about history of this time. And it will remind you of what a great capital Warsaw actually is. The city that stood against one of the greatest tyrannies the world has ever seen and rose again to become a modern leading city in Europe. The next series of episodes will take you through the history of the Warsaw Uprising. Thanks for watching.
Hello, and welcome back to Poland Daily Travel. We're here in the Warsaw Uprising Museum, and it's a fascinating place. Ola, as we're moving along, we need to talk about the Jewish community, I think.
Exactly, which constituted a vital part of the Polish community here before World War II started. We need to remember that once World War II started, Germans would close Jews in ghettos. The Warsaw Ghetto was the biggest ghetto in the whole occupied Europe.
And we're right on the edge of it, aren't we?
Yeah. It was encircled by a 3-meter wall made of brick. People could not get out without a pass. They were living in difficult conditions, overpopulation, 180 calories to nourish one person a day.
180 calories? How can you live on that? You don't.
Yeah, that's why people would die. That's why they would
You couldn't
suffer.
live on that.
Yeah, exactly.
It was horrible suffering.
In the very first 2 years of the existence of the ghetto, 100,000 people lost their lives, but this process of extermination was too slow for Germans. That's why in 1942 they decided to speed up the process of killing people, on mass scale, and to build death camps. Till 1942, only concentration camps operated. After 42, the final solution to the Jewish problem is introduced, and the installation of the death camps, which are eventually constructed on the Polish soil.
And what was the Jewish population of Warsaw before?
380,000 people in 1939, but Germans would drag about 100,000 people from outside towns inside to the ghetto. Yes. So during the existence of the ghetto till 1942, we had about 500,000 people living inside the ghetto. And we need to remember that occupied Poland was the only country in the whole occupied Europe where for any kind of help offered to a Jewish person, there would be a death sentence. So those Poles who tried to save their Jewish friends, Jewish neighbors, encountered Jews, they would be executed for that. And I'm sure you've heard that Poles are known all across the globe as the biggest anti-Semitists. But if you go to Yad Vashem Institute in Jerusalem to discover the list of the writers among the nations, it appears that Poles are placed number one as for those who saved Jews during World War II. Yeah? So
Yes.
we need to remember about the facts, not the myths.
Yes, and I think it's also worth remembering that when in Europe there was a decided actual anti-Semitism in the Middle Ages, there was a Polish king, Kazimierz the Great, who invited
Jews,
Poles
yeah.
and Jews into Poland and said, "Come over here, bring your skills and trade, bring your learning," because they were very learned people as a group, and bring that to us and contribute to our society. Maybe you can help our people learn to educate themselves as well and to learn trades. So there's a long and distinguished history of Poland being open to the Jewish
Poland used to be
nation.
a multicultural state before World War II. We need to remember about that.
And one other point, now that we got on this subject, that I think is worth making and perhaps crucial, is that the Polish nation, after several hundred years, was the Jewish people and the Catholic people in Poland were inseparable neighbors by this time.
That's it.
So when you live with somebody for hundreds of years, you get to know them. Yeah, and so any attack on the Jewish people within the country, it was the same in Germany too, but the people were silenced in a way. There perhaps, in Poland, they refused because they were also subjugated at the same time. The Germans just started murdering their own people. They probably had the same result and ended up with their own uprisings in Germany. Although we know there were a couple of plots, but you know what I'm saying. Yeah. So the point that's worth making is that Polish, Catholic and Jewish communities were inseparable.
Yeah, living so close for hundreds of years, yes. In Warsaw, we remember the example of Irina Sandler. She was a Red Cross nurse. She would go to the ghetto and cross. She saved 2,500 kids. So always I'm asking, who was hiding those kids once they left the ghetto? Extraterrestrials? No.
They were
Polish
not aliens.
Yeah.
They were not Martians. They were Poles.
These were
Catholic Poles.
Yeah. Polish families who had to pretend that they have a newborn baby, because these were infants that were smuggled in a bag with double bottoms. So she was so courageous, and her example.
She did it on trams, didn't she?
Yeah, also.
Yeah, a lot, sometimes on trams, and etc.
And her life is really exemplary as for what we experience here under the German and the Soviet terror, because right after the end of World War II, she got imprisoned by the communist authorities. She was accused for collaboration with Germans. So imagine how crazy.
Topsy-turvy. Yeah. I think we could all learn from that example and learn to live up to a higher standard. We could all learn from that. Okay. Poland Daily Travel. You're a very interesting lady. I'm glad we got you to talk to us. Okay, we'll be right back.